Hey guys, so I've added a new set of masks to MaskLogic, and it's just a free update. I just added that and I'm pushing it out to existing customers. If you're not an existing customer and you purchase MaskLogic, you'll have this function. Now, a couple of caveats about it first. One, it does use a function of the Photoshop Neuro filters, which are in fact, many of them are still in fact in beta. And what we're using, I'll just show you real quick on the Neuro filters, we are using the depth blur function. Now, when you go to the Neuro filter and go to depth blur, there's all kinds of things you can choose here, from adding a little bit more of that camera blur, that bokeh kind of look, and changing the hue and the temperature and adding haze, and all of that is amazing. However, you can leverage the Neuro filter to output what's called a depth mask. So I'm going to show you that now we have that option in MaskLogic. Even though it's still a beta, I went ahead and put it in there as an extra choice, an extra tool if you want it, okay? It can still be leveraged the way MaskLogic leverages things, and I'm going to show you what I mean. And I'm also going to show you some examples of what a depth blur might be able to be used for, okay? So let's go ahead and talk about that. All right, so if you're new to MaskLogic, one thing that normally I recommend to do, if you have a portrait like I do here, Bree in a UK rainforest, we have the NBP Portrait Mask Bank. Now, when you run that action, it sets up a bunch of channels. That's why I have the channels palette over here open by itself so we can look at that. It sets up a bunch of channels that can then be used as masks. So basically, it just tucks away a bunch of masks into the channels, and we can be used in multiple different ways. Now, there's a lot of videos about MaskLogic. You guys can go check those out, but I'm going to review a few things as I talk about these now depth masks, okay? So let's check it out. Let's go ahead and run it. It can take a few minutes. I've got a slightly newer computer since last time I recorded, so it won't take that long, but I'm still going to fast forward. It can take 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 seconds to run the portrait mask bank. And remember, when I tap it, it's going to say, hey, if something says not found or duplicate not available or no more than 50% visible, just relax and keep hitting continue. I'm going to start that now, and you'll see that I'll keep hitting continue. It'll make everything that it can and leave out anything it can't. Here we go. All right, so it's done. Now you notice during that fast forward that a bunch of windows popped up, and I was saying, oh, I couldn't find the sky. Oh, I couldn't do this. Oh, I couldn't do that. And that's just Adobe's dialogues popping up, but nothing craps out. It still finishes. Let's take a look at what happened. All right. So we have in the channel, we have a skin mask ready to go that you can call at any moment. A subject mask, of course, the inverse of that is the background. A mouth mask, not as important. Eye mask, not as important. The hair masks on Adobe are really, really good. Wardrobe usually fails. This one did okay, but usually it fails. Adobe has just not done well on that one unless it's a very, very clear sort of catalog shot. I notice it usually messes up, okay? We have a coat mask because that's a new function that I noticed Adobe implemented a few months ago. However, it tends to fail as well, again, unless it's not a very straightforward catalog shot. Then we have saturation mask, highlights, midtones, and shadows are very usable. Now, you notice I don't automatically have a depth mask on the bank function because those are still very much in beta, even though, something like a wardrobe mask tends to fail. It's not in beta, whereas the Neuro filters still are. So I'm not implementing that on here because that can and probably will change. But you have the option now of right here, depth background channel and depth subject channel. They're just inverses of each other, but they're easy. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Depth background channel. Let's go ahead and create that. And the end result will be a depth mask. Let's take a look at it, depth background. This is a depth mask, okay? Remember how masks work. White is show everything, right? And then black is block everything, and every gray in between is everything in between. So what does this show? The default that apparently Adobe likes to use is to focus on the background when it makes a depth mask output, right? So naturally, I'm just going to go ahead and make it just to have it, but we have depth subject channel, right? So we're going to go ahead and put that one up there. It's simply an inverse, like I said, depth background, depth subject. This is so you can focus more on the subject and less on the background when it comes to that depth, that camera blur element. Somehow or another, it uses AI to determine what's in the foreground, because if you look at this image right here, you'll notice that this rock up front, which is not completely sharp, not as sharp as Bree, this rock is still seen as a foreground element and is masked out. That's pretty common. I'm sure this function will evolve in Photoshop as it goes forward. And I know that, Luminar Neo and some other tools have really cool depth masking functions, but the idea of having a depth mask can be cool because you can still use it like any other mask. And in MaskLogic, we can do Boolean intersections and additions and things of that nature. So for example, let's say I come here and I say, all right, I'll tell you what I want to do. I want to select the subject mask. So I'm going to hold down Command or Control and click it. Now I have the luminance of it. But let's say I think I don't want her to be even a little bit like faded in the selection. I want her completely selected. Okay, hold down Command and Shift and click subject mask. Now you've added the subject mask to the depth mask. What does that mean for us? Well, let's take a look. Let's go back to the RGB. What if I were to right now, well, there's different ways to do it. Let's do kind of the sloppy way. Let's Command or Control J right now. And what have we done? Hold down Alt or Option and click the eyeball. We have her completely selected, right? Because we added the subject mask, right, to the original selection. And then we have the rest of the image sort of wispy, sort of faded selected. What does that mean for us? Well, let's say, for example, we run a high pass. I'm going to put like a 2, something kind of high, right? And then we put it on hard light. Now we're sharpening just her nice and sharp, okay? Off and on, and any sharpening method will work. We're not sharpening the blurry areas. And of course, we're sharpening the rocks and everything a little bit. That's how we created it that way, using a selection cut, if you will. But we can also be a little bit smarter about it. We can duplicate the background layer, and we can go back to our high pass. We can put it on hard light, and then now we can come back to subject channel, right? Hold down Command or Control, click it. Hold down Command or Control and Shift, and click the subject to add it. Go back to the RGB, and then now we mask that. That gives us a little bit more flexibility. What are we doing? We're now only allowing her to be sharpened nice and clear. She's completely subject selected, and then the rest is sort of blended in. We can modify this in any sort of way. Now, one of the most common things that people also like, for example, let's say you want to create like some haze and some mood coming from the background, whether you use Boris effects for some real lighting effects or some kind of brushes, or just simply a white blob like I'm about to do. Sometimes we can have a lot of fun like this too, okay? So we make a white blob sort of there. Boom. Okay, we have a white blob covering everything. Doesn't look entirely real. What can we do to make it potentially real? Well, for one, we can choose the depth background, okay? We don't have to view it to do this. We can stay on the RGB channel with this open, hold down Command or Control, click the depth background, and then on that puffball layer, we make a mask. Boom. And now we're already a little bit better than we were. It doesn't look completely real yet, but it definitely looks better than that, right? Okay, so now it's accounting for depth. Couple of things that we can explore here. One, we can try a different blend mode. What does soft light look like? Okay, already helping the cause. It gives a little bit of haze to the background. It doesn't look real bright and like flary because it's not a bright and flary sort of environment anyway, and that's fine. Another thing we can do gently is apply some feather to that mask, right? Because right now it's a hard mask, as it tends to be, right? So we can apply some feather on that property there, on the mask properties. And sometimes that helps marry the whole thing together. I'll tell you right now, if you do this kind of like adding haze to the background, it's a good idea. There's a little haze already. And it's another good idea to do it very, very subtle. And you can imagine all the different things that you can do with these type of masks. Now, what's cool is that if you've seen the other MaskLogic videos, you'll know that we have this calculate function. It's just Photoshop's calculate function over here. That's all it is. Okay, calculations. But if we tap it, let's go ahead and duplicate my background layer. If we tap it, we come in here. Now we can choose a couple of things. All the default settings are ready for masking, like in that Boolean sort of intersection kind of thing, right? So we can go, instead of gray, which is the default, we can say, how about subject mask and the subject background? There you go. Cool. Or the depth background. You know, there's just so many different ways that we can try to see. Why would you want that? I don't know. You might not want that. I don't know. But you can also come here and choose background. Now we have her completely omitted. Okay. But we have the depth background. See, we've created that way. We can immediately see how our mask is coming out. Now she's not involved at all. Only the background is, right? The opposite can also be true. Like I said, we can say subject and switch this to subject. And now she's the only thing being selected, which is just a straight subject selection. But if for some reason the subject itself, if she had a lot of depth to her, shot at a certain angle with a lot of camera blur, that would be relevant. So you can see we can still mix and match. You can even do the skin if you wanted to in the back, or the hair mask for some reason, and and the depth. Not usually that relevant, certainly not on a shot like this, but you can use the calculations to then create these selections that you can do anything with. Now, what I have done, just to be thorough though, is you might remember from other videos. If you haven't seen them, that's fine. But we have purge portrait mask channels and then purge mask channels, which is the regular mask bank that doesn't account for portrait stuff like body parts. And the reason why that exists is that deleting channels in Photoshop is a little tedious. So I just created an action that does it. So if I say purge portrait mask channels, it just lets you know, hey, anything you can't find, it's going to yell at you about, and just hit continue. Just hit continue. Anything you can't find, and when you're done, everything is clean, right? Okay, so it didn't get rid of the coat mask. That's something I have to obviously fix. That's okay. That'll be fixed by the time this gets pushed out. But no matter. check it out, see what you think. Remember, you don't have to make the mask bank either. You can also just choose depth background channel and depth subject channel, and we'll fix all of that. There's some little errors here, but I want to show everybody that this is going to be pushed out later today. A couple of minor things to fix, but that's okay. It's still very functional, and you can have those depth masks and subject masks. Actually, one more thing before I go. Keep in mind, too, that you can also increase the intensity of these to make them more wildly variable, more contrast. Let me explain what that means. Let's say I come in here and I want the background to be, you know what? Let's go ahead and select it first. Depth background, there it is. We're going to go ahead and choose a solid color of white. Why not? Change the blend mode to soft light. Okay. Now, because if we look at the mask, she has some of that on her because she's gray, right? Okay, we can cut out that, absolutely. But we can also change the intensity. Look at the mask itself while you're here. Hit Command and Control L, right? And then choose the black eyedropper and choose anywhere gray that you want to make black. Boom, right there. You can choose the white eyedropper and make the background more intense too. Now we've got a harder, more, instead of everything blended with depth levels, now we've got very obvious depth levels, and now the white is everywhere else. Of course, we want that very subtle, so it can be even like a 25%, maybe even a 20%, and we go from there to there if that's the look that we want. Now, one caveat, of course, is if you modify a mask directly with levels or curves while you're here, levels is Command or Control L, and curves is Command or Control M. If you modify a mask, it is permanent. That's the only thing that I don't love. I can't change the contrast of it on the fly. This is now permanent. It would be impossible to get that data back if we did it really, really intense. Now, another thing you can do too, if you just want to maximize, as I like to call it, if you want to maximize your mask, let's say you could click that mask. This is a subject one. And we'll go ahead and put a curves, right? So when we look at the mask, we don't have to look at it, but when we look at it, we can simply hit Shift Option Command or Shift Alt Control L. That'll maximize it. Deepest black, brightest white. Doesn't usually make a radical difference, but it's enough. And still, if you wanted more, you can choose the eyedropper tool and make her completely white even there. Then you can choose the black eyedropper tool and slowly make things a little more intense. And now that curve is only going to affect the strong foreground elements in terms of depth. Now that's almost a subject in the background selection, almost. So it may not be that useful, but it's just something to remember that you can modify a mask once you create it. So check that out. If this video is uploaded, that means that I made all the changes and everything's working great. If you don't have MaskLogic, I welcome you to check it out on the website. Really, really stoked for it. And adding this sort of beta function of depth mask, I think is something that'll be fun. I've been using depth masking more and more lately, especially with all this outdoor work I've done in Puerto Rico a couple months ago. So I just wanted to add that today, and I hope you guys dig it.